Ethan Williams, a 10-year-old who longs to belong, faces daily bullying and exclusion at his prestigious school. When his father, Malcolm, uncovers the truth, they decide to act, starting a movement that could transform their community. Together, they create the Harmony Club, a group that sparks change, challenges prejudice, and brings students together in ways no one expected. Will their efforts inspire lasting acceptance? Or will the resistance they face prove too strong? Subscribe and comment with your thoughts on how this journey will unfold. Ethan Williams sat in his spacious bedroom, carefully organizing his prized comic books, each one a world he could escape to. Despite his father's wealth, the opulence around him felt empty when he compared it to the day he'd just had. School was a place where he felt like he didn't belong. Ethan was only 10, a small boy with a kind heart and a love for science fiction. But these traits, along with his darker skin, seemed to make him a target. He'd spent months enduring whispers, glares, and isolation from his classmates at Oak Ridge Academy, a private school where he was one of the few students who looked like him. Ethan sighed, tucking a comic carefully into its sleeve and wishing the world were different. Downstairs, Malcolm Williams, his father, was preparing dinner. Malcolm was a man who prided himself on success, having built his career from the ground up. To the world, he was an influential entrepreneur and philanthropist, respected and admired. But at home, he was simply Ethan's dad, a role he cherished above all else. As the scent of baked chicken wafted up the staircase, Ethan's stomach rumbled, and he decided it was time to join his dad. He quietly padded down the steps and found Malcolm placing plates on the dining table. "Hey, champ," Malcolm said, ruffling his son's hair affectionately. "How was school?" Ethan forced a smile and shrugged. "It was okay," he mumbled, not wanting to ruin the quiet dinner with his own worries. Malcolm sensed the hesitation in his son's voice. He knew Ethan well enough to recognize when something was wrong. But Ethan was quiet by nature, and getting him to open up took patience. Instead of pressing, Malcolm kept the conversation light, telling Ethan about his day and asking questions about his latest comic book interests. As they ate, Malcolm watched Ethan, noting the tired look in his eyes and the way he absent-mindedly picked at his food. He made a mental note to talk to Ethan later, hoping to coax out whatever was troubling him. The next morning, Ethan was already dreading the school day ahead. He didn't tell his father about the mocking whispers he'd endured in the hallways, nor did he mention the teasing from classmates who'd cornered him after gym class. He'd learned over time to keep these experiences hidden, unsure how to explain them to anyone, even to his dad, who always seemed so strong and sure. As he climbed into the back seat of his father's car, he glanced at Malcolm in the rearview mirror. "Can you pick me up after school today, Dad?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Malcolm looked at his son, surprised. "Of course, Ethan. Is everything all right?" Ethan nodded quickly, looking out the window to avoid his father's gaze. He tried to appear nonchalant, but the tightness in his chest betrayed him. I like it when you pick me up." Malcolm reached out, giving Ethan's shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "You got it, champ. I'll be here as soon as the bell rings." School that day was a blur of hushed insults and avoidance. Ethan kept his head down, moving quietly from class to class, trying to stay out of sight. He couldn't help but notice the stares from his classmates and the smirks shared between them. Even his teacher, Mrs. Worthington, who was usually so kind, seemed distant today, not calling on him when he raised his hand, though she called on every other student. It was small things, subtle actions, but they stung all the same. During lunch, Ethan sat alone under the big oak tree in the courtyard, his usual spot, away from the bustling cafeteria where other students laughed and shared stories. He focused on his sandwich, each bite tasteless, the loneliness heavier than ever. He'd overheard some kids mocking him earlier, using words he didn't fully understand but knew were meant to make him feel less than them. He wanted to stand up to them, to say something back, but the fear of making it worse kept him silent. When the final bell rang, Ethan felt relief wash over him. He gathered his things and rushed to the school gates, scanning the row of cars for his dad's familiar black sedan. Seeing Malcolm pull up, Ethan felt his spirits lift a little. "How was your day, bud?" Malcolm asked, watching Ethan in the rearview mirror as he climbed into the back seat. "It was fine," Ethan mumbled, but Malcolm noticed the tired look that hadn't left his son's face since the night before. They drove home in silence, but Malcolm couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. He decided he would find out what it was, even if it meant doing a bit of investigating himself. That evening, Ethan retreated to his room after dinner, claiming he had homework to finish. Malcolm lingered by his door, contemplating whether to go in and press his son for answers. But he sensed Ethan's need for space, and instead planned of his own. If Ethan wouldn't tell him, he would find out what was troubling him. Malcolm knew he couldn't protect Ethan from everything, but he had hoped his success would shield his son from some of the harsher realities he'd faced himself as a young man. Still, he'd seen hints of Ethan's struggles before, and he was determined to address whatever pain was weighing on his son. The following day, Malcolm dropped Ethan off at school as usual. But this time, he parked nearby, determined to see firsthand what his son was dealing with. He watched Ethan walk into the schoolyard, his shoulders hunched and his steps slow. As he observed, Malcolm saw Ethan approach a group of boys who quickly turned their backs on him, laughing. Ethan stood there awkwardly for a moment before moving to a corner, his head down. Malcolm's heart tightened as he watched his son slip into the shadows, trying to make himself invisible. The bell rang, and the students filed into the school, but Malcolm's resolve only strengthened. He would do whatever it took to ensure his son felt safe and respected. Starting now. The school day passed in a mixture of dread and resignation for Ethan. He kept his head down and tried to avoid the groups of students who seemed to single him out wherever he went. Though he knew every inch of Oak Ridge Academy's hallways and classrooms, it felt like a hostile place, filled with eyes that watched him but never truly saw him. When he arrived home that evening, he tried his best to avoid his father's curious gaze. But Malcolm was observant, and when he saw Ethan's shirt stained and rumpled, his suspicions only grew stronger. "Hey, champ," Malcolm greeted, trying to keep his voice casual. "How was school today?" Ethan shrugged, quickly moving toward the stairs. "Fine." Malcolm reached out, gently touching his son's shoulder. "Come on, Ethan. You can talk to me. You know that, right?" Ethan stopped, his back to his father. He took a shaky breath, wanting to say something but fearing that it would only make things worse. He glanced back, forcing a smile. "I know, Dad. It's nothing, really." Malcolm let his hand fall, watching as Ethan disappeared up the stairs to his room. Something was wrong, and he could see it in the way Ethan's shoulders slumped, in the defeated way he walked. This wasn't just a rough patch, it was something much deeper. The next morning, Malcolm followed through with his plan to observe Ethan's school day from a distance. He arranged his meetings for later, determined to understand what was happening in his son's world. As he parked his car near the school, Malcolm felt a pang of guilt. Part of him worried he was invading Ethan's privacy, but his instinct as a father overpowered that concern. He would rather his son be a little embarrassed than continue to suffer alone. From his vantage point, he watched as Ethan walked into the schoolyard, clutching his backpack tightly. Malcolm noticed that other children walked in pairs or groups, laughing and chattering. But Ethan walked alone, his head down and his steps quick, as though he wanted to avoid being seen. After a few minutes, Malcolm saw a small group of boys approach Ethan. They exchanged a few words, and Malcolm saw the boys point at Ethan and laugh. Ethan's face fell, and he took a step back, glancing around as though searching for an escape. He didn't fight back, didn't argue. Instead, he stood there taking it in silence. The boys laughed louder, and one of them reached out, flicking a piece of paper at Ethan's face. Malcolm's hands gripped the steering wheel, his jaw clenched as he watched his son endure this humiliation. He'd never felt such a strong urge to intervene, but he held back, wanting to understand the full picture before acting. Later, Malcolm took a walk around the campus, hoping to observe without drawing attention to himself. He overheard snippets of conversations from students passing by, little whispers that struck him like sharp pinpricks. "Did you see what Ethan was wearing today? Looks like he got it from the thrift store. I don't know why he even bothers trying to sit with us." Malcolm's heart ached with every word. He had spent his life working hard to give Ethan everything he needed, and yet none of that seemed to protect him from this kind of cruelty. He felt a surge of frustration, wondering how the teachers and staff could allow this to happen right under their noses. When he walked past the classrooms, he noticed Mrs. Worthington, one of Ethan's teachers. She was known for being strict but fair. Yet when Malcolm listened closely, he noticed how her tone shifted when she addressed Ethan. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Malcolm could sense the lack of warmth, the way her eyes lingered a little longer, as though questioning his presence in her classroom. Malcolm's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the bell, and he watched as Ethan made his way toward the exit. Malcolm knew he couldn't hide in the shadows anymore. He needed to step forward and confront what he'd just seen. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, Malcolm decided it was time to address what he had witnessed. "Ethan," he began carefully, "I saw you at school today. I saw those boys teasing you, and I saw how Mrs. Worthington ignored you in class." Ethan's fork clattered onto his plate, his eyes widening. You were at school?" He looked away, his face flushed with a mixture of embarrassment and shame. "Why would you do that, Dad?" Malcolm leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Because I know something's been bothering you, Ethan, and you don't have to face it alone." Ethan bit his lip, his hands trembling slightly. After a moment, he whispered, I didn't want you to know." "Know what, son?" Ethan took a shaky breath, his words spilling out in a rush. "They make fun of me, Dad. Every day. They say things about how I look, and about you, too. They say I don't belong there, that I don't deserve to be there." His voice cracked, and he looked down, unable to meet his father's eyes. Malcolm felt a surge of anger, but he forced himself to stay calm for Ethan's sake. "Ethan, none of what they're saying is true. You belong there just as much as anyone else." Ethan shook his head, tears welling up in his eyes. "It doesn't feel like it, Dad. They make me feel different, like I'm not good enough." Malcolm took a deep breath, reaching out to hold his son's hand. "Listen to me, Ethan. You are more than enough. Those boys don't understand you, and their words don't define you. You have a right to feel safe and respected, just like anyone else." Ethan sniffed, wiping his eyes. "But what can we do?" "They'll just keep doing it, no matter what I say." Malcolm's jaw set with determination. "We're going to make sure they stop. I'm not going to let anyone make you feel small or unworthy. Tomorrow I'm going to speak with your school. They need to know what's going on, and they need to address it." Ethan looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "You really think it'll help?" "I know it will," Malcolm replied firmly, "because no one has the right to treat you like that. And I'm going to make sure they understand that." That night, as Ethan lay in bed, he felt a weight lift from his shoulders. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel entirely alone. His father's promise echoed in his mind, a steady reminder that he didn't have to face this struggle by himself. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. Meanwhile, Malcolm stayed up late, planning his next steps. He knew the school might resist or downplay the issue, but he was determined. His son deserved to grow up feeling safe, respected, and valued, and Malcolm was prepared to fight for that. This resolve fueled him as he considered every word he would say to the school administrators. He would go in as a parent, not as a wealthy donor or businessman. His son's dignity was not a bargaining chip, and he would accept nothing less than action. The next morning, Malcolm walked into Oak Ridge Academy with a determination that seemed to echo through the halls. Students were milling about, lockers slamming shut, voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony. Malcolm's gaze remained fixed ahead as he made his way to the main office. He could feel the weight of his purpose with each step. His son's experience here had become personal, and he intended to ensure that no child would have to endure what Ethan had. The receptionist looked up, a polite but wary smile spreading across her face. "Good morning, Mr. Williams. Do you have an appointment?" "Not exactly," Malcolm replied, keeping his voice calm. "But I'd like to speak with Principal Harris." "It's about my son, Ethan." The receptionist hesitated, sensing the urgency in his tone. "One moment, please." She dialed the principal's office and spoke in hushed tones before looking back at Malcolm. "Principal Harris will see you now." Malcolm thanked her and strode down the hallway to the principal's office, his mind filled with the images of Ethan's troubled face and the hurt he'd hidden for so long. He knocked once and then entered, finding Principal Harris sitting behind a large, polished desk, his expression welcoming but guarded. "Mr. Williams?" Principal Harris greeted, rising to shake his hand. "Please have a seat. I understand you wanted to discuss Ethan?" Malcolm sat down, maintaining steady eye contact. "Yes, I wanted to talk about the way he's been treated at this school, by other students, and quite frankly, even by some of the staff." Principal Harris's eyebrows raised slightly. "I'm sorry to hear that Ethan feels he's been treated unfairly, but I can assure you, Oak Ridge takes pride in its inclusive environment. We do not tolerate bullying of any kind." Malcolm's expression hardened, his voice firm but controlled. "With all due respect, Principal Harris, I've seen firsthand what my son endures here. I watched as his classmates mocked him and treated him as though he didn't belong. And the fact that this happened under your staff's watch makes it clear to me that this school is failing him." The principal shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mr. Williams, I can understand your concerns, but children can sometimes be unintentionally hurtful. I'm sure they don't mean any harm." Malcolm leaned forward, his eyes unwavering. "The pain my son feels is very real, Principal Harris, and I'm not here to brush this off as a misunderstanding. I'm here because Ethan, like every child, deserves a school where he feels safe and respected. I need to know what this school is going to do to make sure he gets that." Principal Harris hesitated, sensing Malcolm's determination. "I'll look into it," he said slowly, "and see if any specific incidents have been reported. But I must be honest with you, Mr. Williams, sometimes these situations are complicated." Malcolm's jaw clenched. "Complicated or not, I expect action. I am not only a concerned parent, but as you know, a significant donor to this school. I want to see real steps taken. Counseling for students involved, diversity training for staff, and measures to ensure no other child goes through what Ethan has." The principal's expression shifted as he realized the weight of Malcolm's words. His school relied heavily on the Williams family's contributions, and losing that support could have lasting consequences. He cleared his throat, nodding slowly. "Of course, Mr. Williams. I understand. I'll discuss these matters with the board, and we'll see what steps can be taken." Malcolm's tone softened but remained firm. "I'll give you 2 weeks, Principal Harris. I want a detailed plan in place by then." Outside the office, Malcolm paused, letting the gravity of the conversation sink in. He knew he'd pushed hard, but he also knew it was necessary. His son's well-being was worth every moment of discomfort and every difficult conversation. As he walked back to his car, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, a commitment to make things better, not only for Ethan, but for other children who felt unseen. That afternoon, Ethan met Malcolm at the front gates, a hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Did you talk to them, Dad?" he asked cautiously. Malcolm nodded, resting a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "Yes, I did. And they promised they'd make changes." Ethan's eyes flickered with a mixture of hope and doubt. "You really think they'll do something?" Malcolm offered him a confident smile. "I made sure they know how important this is. And I'll be watching, Ethan. We're not going to let this go." The next day, Principal Harris gathered his teachers and staff for an emergency meeting. His tone was serious as he conveyed the situation, emphasizing the importance of creating a supportive environment for every student. But as he spoke, some of the teachers exchanged glances, a few of them clearly uncomfortable. One teacher, Mr. Thompson, a history instructor who was known for his old-fashioned views, raised a hand. "Principal Harris, with all due respect, these children are young. They don't understand these issues the way adults do. It's just teasing. It's part of growing up." Principal Harris took a deep breath, struggling to maintain his composure. "Mr. Thompson, we cannot afford to dismiss this as just teasing. If a student feels excluded or uncomfortable, it's our duty to address it. I'll be implementing a diversity training program for all staff members, and we'll have school-wide sessions for the students as well." Mr. Thompson frowned but said nothing more, and the meeting continued with most teachers nodding in agreement. Though the discomfort in the room was palpable, over the next week changes began to unfold at Oak Ridge. Posters about inclusivity and respect were placed throughout the hallways, and teachers received training on cultural sensitivity. Ethan noticed the difference. Some of the teachers who had once seemed indifferent now tried to include him, calling on him in class and offering encouraging smiles. But the changes didn't happen overnight. Some of his classmates continued to treat him with subtle disdain, the whispered comments and occasional sidelong glances still stinging. It was difficult for Ethan to let his guard down, to believe that things would truly get better. Yet, knowing his father was behind him, standing up for him, made him feel a little stronger each day. One afternoon, Mrs. Worthington approached Ethan after class. Her expression was thoughtful, her tone gentler than he'd ever heard. "Ethan, I just wanted you to know, if you ever need someone to talk to, my door is open. I'm sorry if I've ever made you feel like you didn't belong." Ethan was surprised, unsure how to respond. He managed a small nod, feeling a strange mix of relief and confusion. He wasn't sure what had changed in her, but he was grateful for the gesture. At home, he shared the news with his father, and Malcolm felt a flicker of hope. The school was beginning to take responsibility, but he knew it was just the beginning. There was still much work to be done. As days turned into weeks, Ethan found himself surrounded by small but meaningful changes. More students began to reach out, inviting him to join them at lunch or including him in group projects. Some were genuine and others were awkward attempts to show they were being nice, but Ethan appreciated the gestures all the same. He started to feel less alone, his steps lighter as he walked through the hallways. He still carried the memories of the hurtful words, the moments when he'd felt invisible or judged, but with each day, they seemed to lose a little of their sting. One evening, as Malcolm sat beside Ethan in the living room, he placed an arm around his son's shoulders. "How are you feeling, champ? Are things getting any better?" Ethan nodded slowly, a shy smile on his face. "Yeah, they are. Thanks for helping me, Dad." Malcolm squeezed his son's shoulder, pride filling his chest. "You're stronger than you know, Ethan. I'm so proud of you." For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a sense of belonging, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, he could face the challenges ahead, knowing he wasn't alone. Malcolm arrived at Oak Ridge Academy 2 weeks later, just as he'd promised. The building was quiet in the early morning light, the corridors empty and still. He took a deep breath, preparing himself for what he hoped would be a productive meeting. Principal Harris had assured him that progress was underway, but Malcolm was here to see for himself. The principal's door was open, and Malcolm stepped inside. Principal Harris stood to greet him, his demeanor warm but tinged with a hint of wariness. "Mr. Williams," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. "Thank you for coming in. I believe we've made some real headway." Malcolm sat down, crossing his arms. "I hope so, Principal Harris. My son deserves to feel safe here, and I'd like to know exactly what steps you've taken to make that a reality." The principal cleared his throat, opening a folder on his desk. "Over the past 2 weeks, we've held 2 mandatory training sessions for staff on cultural sensitivity and inclusion. I've also met with several teachers individually to discuss ways to foster a more welcoming environment in their classrooms." Malcolm listened intently, nodding as he followed along. "And what about the students?" Principal Harris shifted slightly, his gaze dropping to the notes in front of him. "We've introduced a peer mentorship program where older students can volunteer to support younger ones who might feel isolated. And we're organizing a monthly assembly focused on diversity and community, starting next month." Malcolm's face softened a little. He could see that efforts were being made, but he knew these were only the first steps. "I appreciate the work you've done so far, Principal Harris, but I'd also like to see immediate consequences for students who engage in bullying. Too often, these things are swept under the rug." Principal Harris nodded, a serious expression on his face. "We've updated our disciplinary policy to include clear consequences for any form of discrimination or harassment. Students who violate these rules will face detention, suspension, or other disciplinary action as appropriate." Malcolm felt a flicker of relief. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. "Thank you," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'll be keeping an eye on the situation, and I expect transparency. If there are any incidents involving my son, I want to be informed immediately." "Of course, Mr. Williams," Principal Harris replied. "We're committed to creating a supportive environment for every student." That evening, Malcolm shared the news with Ethan, whose expression brightened with each word. "So, they're really going to do something?" he asked, a hint of hope in his voice. Yes, Malcolm replied, smiling. They're taking it seriously, and they've promised to follow through. But I also want you to feel empowered, Ethan. If anyone mistreats you, I want you to speak up. You have a voice, and it deserves to be heard. Ethan nodded, his face reflecting a mixture of relief and resolve. Thanks, Dad. I'll try. Malcolm felt a surge of pride as he looked at his son, seeing the resilience and courage that had carried him through these difficult months. He knew the journey wasn't over, but for the first time he felt that they were moving in the right direction. The next day, as Ethan walked into school, he felt a new sense of purpose. The whispers and glances he'd grown used to seemed a little quieter, the stares a little softer. He didn't know if it was because of his father's meeting with the principal, or if the other students were simply growing bored of their taunts. But he welcomed the change. In science class, Mrs. Morales, a kind-hearted teacher who always encouraged Ethan's love for astronomy, pulled him aside after class. "Ethan, I just wanted to check in with you. How have you been doing?" Ethan looked up at her, surprised. I'm okay," he replied, not used to this kind of attention. Mrs. Morales smiled warmly. "If you ever need anything, or just someone to talk to, you know you can come to me." Ethan nodded, feeling a glimmer of gratitude. It was a small gesture, but it made him feel seen, and that meant the world to him. Meanwhile, Malcolm's actions were causing ripples beyond Oak Ridge Academy. Word had spread among parents, and while many were supportive, some were less enthusiastic. At a neighborhood gathering, Malcolm found himself approached by several acquaintances, their faces a mix of curiosity and caution. One of them, a fellow businessman named Brad, clapped Malcolm on the shoulder. "I heard about your little crusade at Oak Ridge," he said with a smirk. "Making quite a splash, aren't you?" Malcolm raised an eyebrow, keeping his tone civil. "I wouldn't call it a crusade, Brad. I'm just standing up for my son, and every child who deserves respect." Brad chuckled, shaking his head. "I get it, but you know how kids are. Sometimes they just need to work things out on their own." Malcolm's expression remained calm, though his words were edged with resolve. "It's not about letting kids work it out. It's about creating an environment where my son and every other child feels safe." That shouldn't be a controversial stance. Another parent, a woman named Marissa, stepped in, nodding. "I think it's great what you're doing, Malcolm. My daughter mentioned the changes at school, and it's good for all the kids. It's about time we focused on teaching them respect and empathy." Malcolm smiled at Marissa, grateful for her support. Despite the pushback from some, he felt a growing sense of purpose. His actions were making a difference, not only for Ethan but for other students as well. Back at school, Ethan's journey was still challenging. Some classmates were beginning to treat him with newfound respect, but others remained indifferent or dismissive. One afternoon, Ethan found himself alone in the hallway when he noticed a small group of boys from his class standing nearby, whispering and snickering. He felt his stomach tighten, the familiar anxiety rising. But this time, instead of shrinking away, he took a deep breath and walked past them, his shoulders squared and his gaze steady. One of the boys muttered something under his breath, but Ethan ignored it, refusing to let their words define him. As he walked on, a girl named Lily caught up with him, a friendly smile on her face. "Hey, Ethan," she said, falling into step beside him. "I was just wondering if you'd like to join us for lunch today? A bunch of us are sitting outside and, well, I thought it might be nice to have some company." Ethan's eyes widened in surprise, and he hesitated, unsure if he could trust the invitation. But Lily's smile was genuine, and something in her eyes told him that she meant it. He nodded, a shy smile forming on his lips. "Sure, I'd like that." As they walked to the lunch area, Ethan felt a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in a long time. The changes were small, but they were real, and they gave him hope. That evening, when he told his father about Lily's invitation, Malcolm's eyes shone with pride. "You're finding your place, Ethan," he said softly. "And I couldn't be prouder of you." Ethan smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. "Thanks, Dad. I think it's getting better." Malcolm reached out, pulling his son into a hug. "Remember, you're not alone, Ethan, and you never will be." The following days at Oak Ridge were quieter, the usual chatter dampened by an undercurrent of tension. While some students seemed curious about the recent changes, others eyed Ethan with resentment. The new policies against bullying and the disciplinary consequences had made it clear that disrespectful behavior wouldn't be tolerated. But Ethan could still feel the uncomfortable stares and hear the occasional mutterings as he walked through the hallways. At home, Malcolm was feeling the weight of his decision to stand up to the school. Though some parents had shown support, others voiced doubts, wondering if he was blowing things out of proportion. At a neighborhood gathering, a few parents approached him directly, each with their own perspective. Malcolm, a woman named Denise, began cautiously, her expression conflicted. "I just wanted to say, I understand why you're doing this. But don't you think you're making it harder for Ethan?" Malcolm looked at her, holding her gaze. "Harder for Ethan? Denise, he's had to deal with this for months. The school ignored it, and so did we. Standing by and letting it continue would have been much worse." Denise shifted, uncomfortable. "I know, I worry for my own kids too. These new policies seem strict, and my son told me he feels like he can't say anything without getting in trouble." Malcolm's voice was calm but firm. "These policies are there to protect everyone, Denise. Your son has nothing to worry about if he treats others with respect." A man nearby, Brad, chimed in with a slight frown. "I get it, Malcolm, but kids need to toughen up. Learning to deal with this stuff builds character. I mean, we didn't have all these sensitivity rules when we were growing up." Malcolm's patience wore thin. "Maybe not, Brad, but we also don't live in the same world we grew up in. My son, and every other child in that school, has a right to feel safe. And if standing up for that makes some people uncomfortable, then maybe it's time we all rethink what we're teaching our kids." There was a pause, tension hanging in the air. Then Marissa, a mother who had previously shown her support, nodded. "I think it's brave, Malcolm, what you're doing. My daughter's already talked about how different the school feels, and I think it's for the better." Malcolm smiled gratefully at her, encouraged by her support. He'd known that not everyone would agree with his stance, but seeing that some parents were on his side renewed his sense of purpose. He would continue to fight for Ethan and for every other child who needed a safe environment to grow and learn. The next day at school, Ethan was met with a mixture of responses from his peers. Some kids gave him respectful nods, others ignored him entirely, and a few still looked at him with contempt. But Ethan had grown stronger. He kept his head high, refusing to let the whispers and stares break his resolve. During lunch, he sat with Lily and a small group of students who had begun to include him in their circle. Lily was friendly and warm, always quick to offer a kind word or an easy smile. Ethan appreciated her company more than she knew, and slowly, he felt himself beginning to relax. "Hey, Ethan," Lily said one day, nudging him playfully. "You know, we're thinking of starting a club, something for students who want to, I don't know, make things better around here. We're thinking of calling it the Harmony Club. What do you think?" Ethan blinked, surprised. "Really? I think that sounds amazing." Lily beamed, her enthusiasm infectious. "Great! We want it to be a place where people can just be themselves, without worrying about fitting in or being judged. And we'd love for you to help start it." Ethan's heart swelled with gratitude. For so long, he'd felt alone, isolated by others' perceptions of him. Now he was being invited to lead, to help create a place of acceptance and understanding. "I'd love to," he said, a genuine smile lighting up his face. Back at home, Malcolm was deep in thought. His interactions with other parents had reminded him just how deep-rooted biases could be, even among adults. He knew that for real change to happen, it couldn't just be the children who were educated. It had to be the entire community. That night, he began drafting an idea he'd had for weeks. A community-wide meeting on inclusion and empathy, open to all parents, students, and staff. He would invite speakers, organize activities, and create a space where everyone could voice their concerns and learn from one another. When he shared the idea with Ethan, his son looked at him with wide eyes. "You mean, everyone's going to come together? Even the people who don't agree with us?" "That's the idea," Malcolm replied, his voice steady. "Change doesn't come from hiding or avoiding conflict, Ethan. It comes from facing it head-on, from opening people's eyes to what they may not see. Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. I think that's brave, Dad." Malcolm ruffled his son's hair, smiling. "I think it's the right thing to do. And you've taught me that, Ethan." Over the next week, Malcolm sent out invitations and organized the details of the meeting. He reached out to parents, teachers, and even local leaders, hoping to bridge the gaps that had kept them divided for too long. The day of the meeting arrived, and the school auditorium filled quickly with parents, teachers, and students, all curious and some a bit skeptical. Malcolm stood at the front of the room, his heart pounding as he prepared to address the crowd. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice carrying through the room. "I know that this issue has stirred a lot of strong feelings in our community. But I'm here because my son, Ethan, and other students like him deserve an environment where they feel respected and valued. And I believe that can only happen if we work together." He paused, letting his words sink in. "I understand that change can be uncomfortable, but if it means our children can feel safe and accepted, isn't it worth it?" A murmur ran through the crowd, and Malcolm continued, "Tonight, we're going to hear from speakers who can help us understand the importance of empathy, acceptance, and creating a community that values everyone, regardless of differences." One of the speakers, a local counselor, spoke about the impact of bullying on young minds, sharing real stories of how discrimination could affect children's confidence and future relationships. As she spoke, Malcolm could see faces in the crowd softening, their expressions shifting from skepticism to understanding. Then it was Ethan's turn. Malcolm had asked him to share his experience, but he'd left the decision up to his son. As Ethan stepped onto the stage, he felt his heart race, the weight of so many eyes on him. He took a deep breath, his father's reassuring nod steadying him. I didn't ask for any of this to happen," he began, his voice shaky but growing stronger with each word. "But it did, and it hurt. It made me feel like I didn't belong, like I was somehow less. But my dad showed me that I do belong, and everyone deserves to feel that way." He glanced at his father, drawing strength from Malcolm's proud smile. "We can make this school a better place, not just for me but for everyone. And I hope you'll help us." The audience was silent, captivated by Ethan's honesty. As he stepped down, a few parents wiped away tears, while others nodded, their expressions thoughtful. After the meeting, parents and teachers approached Malcolm and Ethan, offering words of support and expressing their own hopes for change. Marissa hugged Malcolm, her voice filled with gratitude. "You've given this community something special, Malcolm, and you've shown us all what it means to stand up for what's right." That night, as Malcolm and Ethan returned home, they felt a sense of accomplishment and peace. They knew the journey wasn't over, but they'd taken a powerful step forward. Together, they had inspired their community to look beyond its old habits and start building something new, a place where everyone, no matter who they were, could feel at home. Ethan looked up at his dad, a contented smile on his face. "Thank you, Dad, for everything." Malcolm pulled him into a hug, his heart full. "You've been braver than anyone, Ethan. I'm so proud of you." And with that, they went inside, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing they would face them together. In the days following the community meeting, a ripple of change swept through Oak Ridge Academy. The school's walls, once stark and formal, were now adorned with student-made posters encouraging kindness and respect. Quotes about empathy and inclusion were posted on classroom doors, and students found themselves more mindful of the words they chose. For the first time, Ethan felt a sense of possibility, a hope that maybe, just maybe, he could truly belong here. One afternoon, as he was gathering his books, Lily approached him, her face lit up with excitement. "Ethan, the principal just approved our idea for the Harmony Club. Isn't that amazing?" Ethan blinked, surprised but thrilled. "Really? They're actually letting us start it?" Lily nodded, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "Yeah. They even gave us a space to meet after school every Friday. I think they're serious about making changes, and this club could be part of it." Ethan felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you for making this happen, Lily. I don't think I could have done it without you." Lily shrugged, smiling modestly. "We're in this together, and it's about time everyone felt like they belong here, right?" As they talked, A few other students gathered around, listening with interest. Ethan noticed a boy named Tyler, who had been quiet in the past but now looked intrigued by their conversation. "Hey, Ethan," Tyler said, his voice uncertain but genuine. "Can anyone join this club?" Ethan smiled, nodding. "Of course. It's for everyone who wants to help make the school better." Tyler glanced at his friends, then back at Ethan. "I'd like that. I think it could be really good for all of us." In that moment, Ethan felt the power of connection, a shared goal drawing them together. For so long he had been on the outside, watching others form bonds he could only dream of. Now he was part of something that could make a difference, something that could bring people closer in ways that went beyond surface differences. That evening, Ethan told his father about the Harmony Club and the students who had shown interest in joining. Malcolm listened, a proud smile on his face as he watched his son come alive with excitement. "That's incredible, Ethan. You're helping to create something meaningful," Malcolm said, his voice filled with admiration. "I knew you could do it." Ethan shrugged, a little shy. "It wasn't just me. Lily had the idea and a lot of other kids want to help too." Malcolm's smile widened. "Still, it takes courage to be part of something like that. I'm proud of you for standing up and leading, even when things were tough." As Ethan sat beside his father, he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't known before. His father's support, combined with the growing friendship and solidarity at school, was transforming his world in ways he could never have imagined. On the first Friday after school, the Harmony Club held its inaugural meeting. They gathered in a small, cozy classroom that the principal had set aside, and Ethan looked around at the group of students who had joined. Some were familiar faces, like Lily and Tyler, while others were students he'd only seen in passing. Lily started the meeting, her voice steady and full of purpose. "Thank you all for being here. We wanted to start this club to make our school a place where everyone feels welcome and respected. No one should have to feel alone or like they don't belong." She glanced at Ethan, giving him an encouraging nod. Taking a deep breath, Ethan spoke up. "I used to feel invisible here, like no one saw me or cared. But now I know that we have the power to change that, to make things better for everyone." The room was silent, each student taking in his words. One girl, Sophia, raised her hand. "I've felt that way too," she admitted softly. "Like I don't fit in because I'm different. But maybe we can help each other." Lily beamed at her, nodding. "Exactly. This club is about supporting each other and making sure no one feels left out. We can plan events, create projects, and find ways to help people feel like they're part of this school." The students spent the next hour brainstorming ideas, coming up with everything from a buddy system to pair students who might feel isolated with friends, to organizing monthly unity days, where they would hold activities focused on empathy and understanding. Each idea brought new excitement, and by the end of the meeting everyone left with a sense of purpose. For Ethan, it was more than just a club. It was the beginning of a new chapter in his life, one where he was no longer alone. Over the following weeks, the Harmony Club's influence spread throughout Oak Ridge. They held their first Unity Day, an event that invited students to participate in team-building games and activities that celebrated each person's unique background and strengths. Students shared stories, laughed together, and bonded in ways they hadn't before. The club's buddy system paired students who felt out of place with peers who could offer friendship and support. To Ethan's amazement, even some of the teachers became involved. Mrs. Morales, his science teacher, volunteered to be the club's faculty advisor, helping them organize events and lending her own insights. She encouraged other teachers to adopt practices that promoted kindness and inclusivity, and her influence helped shape the school's evolving culture. For the first time, Oak Ridge was transforming into a place where diversity was celebrated, where students could be themselves without fear of judgment. Ethan felt lighter, more confident, and his bond with his classmates grew in ways he'd never expected. At home, Malcolm watched with pride as his son blossomed. The boy who had once walked with his head down, afraid of standing out, was now a leader, inspiring others to make a difference. It was more than he had ever hoped for, and he felt an immense gratitude for the journey they had taken together. One evening, as they sat at the dinner table, Malcolm spoke to Ethan, his voice filled with warmth. "You've shown incredible courage, Ethan. What you're doing, It's making a real difference." Ethan smiled, looking down at his plate, a bit shy. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. You showed me what it means to stand up for what's right." Malcolm reached across the table, giving Ethan's hand a squeeze. "I'm just so proud of you. You've become a leader, someone who brings people together, and that's a gift you'll carry with you for the rest of your life." Ethan's eyes shone with gratitude, and he felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that he was part of something bigger than himself. He had discovered his own strength and realized that he could be a force for change, a beacon for others who might be struggling. As the school year went on, Ethan and the Harmony Club continued to make an impact. They held more Unity Days, organized talent shows that showcased each student's unique abilities, and created gratitude walls, where students could post messages of appreciation for their peers and teachers. With each event, the school became a little more united, a little more open. Friendships formed across groups that had once been divided, and students who had once felt like outsiders now found themselves at the heart of a new, inclusive community. For Ethan, it was a dream come true. He had gone from feeling isolated and invisible to being a leader and friend. His journey had not been easy, but it had brought him closer to his father, to his classmates, and ultimately, to himself. Malcolm continued to support the club, attending events and encouraging other parents to get involved. The community, once divided, now came together in support of their children, recognizing that the values of empathy and kindness were not only important, but essential for a better future. As the year ended, Ethan stood in front of the entire school assembly, his heart pounding with pride. He had been asked to give a speech about the Harmony Club and the impact it had made, and as he looked out over the audience, he saw the faces of his friends, his teachers, and his father, all smiling back at him. "Thank you for helping us make Oak Ridge a place where everyone can feel safe and respected," he began, his voice steady and strong. "We've come a long way, and we still have more work to do. But together, we've shown that kindness and respect can make a real difference. And I'm grateful to be part of this incredible community." The applause that filled the auditorium was loud and heartfelt, a testament to the journey they had all taken together. And as Ethan stepped down from the stage, he felt a sense of peace and joy, knowing that he had found his place and that his story was one of resilience, friendship, and the power of change. The next month, Oak Ridge Academy seemed to be buzzing with a new energy. Students walked the hallways with a sense of camaraderie, and the Harmony Club's Unity Days had become a popular event. The school's culture had shifted in ways that Ethan, and even his father, Malcolm, could barely believe. But as often happens with change, not everyone was eager to embrace it. At a town meeting one evening, Malcolm was approached by a small group of parents who had heard of Oak Ridge's recent shift in focus toward diversity and inclusion. They seemed polite enough at first, but their comments quickly revealed a deeper resistance. "Malcolm, we appreciate everything you've done for Oak Ridge," began Mark, a father of one of Ethan's classmates. "But don't you think things are getting a little too political over there?" "My son came home talking about Unity Day, and he felt like he had to watch what he said all the time." Malcolm stayed calm, meeting Mark's gaze evenly. Unity Day isn't about politics. It's about teaching kids to respect each other, no matter their differences. That's something everyone can benefit from, don't you think? Another parent, Sarah, frowned slightly. "It's just that, well, we've heard from some families that their kids feel pressured to act differently. They say it's starting to feel forced." Malcolm felt a familiar frustration but kept his tone respectful. If treating others with kindness feels forced, then maybe we need to ask ourselves why that is. Every child has a right to feel welcome, and for some of them, this school was not always a welcoming place. "We're simply trying to change that." Sarah hesitated, seeming to consider his words, but Mark folded his arms, his expression unconvinced. "Look, Malcolm, we get what you're trying to do, but I think it's gone too far. My son just wants to go to school, learn, and be with his friends without feeling like he has to change who he is." Malcolm took a deep breath, steadying himself. "I understand your concerns, Mark, but this isn't about changing who anyone is. It's about helping kids learn to accept each other, just as they are. That's the world they'll grow up in, and we're only helping them prepare for it." Some parents nodded, clearly agreeing with Malcolm, while others exchanged uneasy glances. But Malcolm knew that change was always met with resistance, and if this meant creating a better environment for Ethan and other kids, he would continue to stand by it. Back at school, Ethan was dealing with his own share of challenges. While most students had embraced the club and its mission, a small group remained distant, watching from the sidelines, casting skeptical looks. One afternoon, Ethan was in the hallway with Lily when a boy named Mason, who had been openly critical of the Harmony Club, approached them with a smirk. "Hey, Ethan," Mason said, his tone mocking. "So are we all supposed to hold hands now and sing songs or something?" Ethan felt his cheeks flush, but he stood his ground. "It's not like that, Mason. We're just trying to make sure no one feels left out." Mason scoffed, shaking his head. "Whatever. I don't get why you care so much. It's just school. Why don't you focus on your grades instead of trying to change everything?" Lily stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Maybe because it matters, Mason. Just because you're fine doesn't mean everyone else is." Mason rolled his eyes, turning away with a dismissive wave. "Whatever. You guys keep doing your little club thing. Just don't expect everyone to join in." As Mason walked off, Ethan let out a breath, feeling a mixture of frustration and sadness. He wanted to believe that everyone could come together, that they could find common ground. But encounters like this reminded him that some people would always be reluctant to change. "Hey," Lily said, giving him a reassuring smile. "Don't let him get to you. Not everyone's going to understand, and that's okay. We're doing this for the people who need it, remember?" Ethan nodded, her words lifting his spirits. "Yeah, you're right. Thanks, Lily." She nudged him playfully. "Anytime. And remember, we've got a whole club behind us." In the following weeks, the Harmony Club faced more pushback. Some parents wrote letters to the school board, expressing concerns about the focus on inclusivity, while a few teachers struggled with the new policies, feeling they limited classroom interactions. But Principal Harris remained firm, supporting the club and its mission. One evening, Malcolm received an invitation to meet with the school board, who had been reviewing feedback from parents and staff. The board was divided. Some members fully supported the Harmony Club's initiatives, while others felt the school was moving too quickly in a direction that made some families uncomfortable. Malcolm attended the meeting, prepared for a difficult conversation. As he sat across from the board members, he felt the weight of responsibility. He was here not only for Ethan, but for every student who had felt isolated or excluded. "Mr. Williams," began Mrs. Carter, a board member with a sympathetic expression. "We understand the good intentions behind the Harmony Club, but we've received concerns from parents who feel that the changes are affecting the school's focus on academics." Malcolm listened carefully before replying, "I appreciate those concerns, Mrs. Carter, but we can't ignore that academics alone aren't enough. Children need to feel safe and valued in order to thrive, and that's exactly what the Harmony Club is working to achieve." Another board member, Mr. Collins, frowned. "But some parents feel their children are being forced into situations they're not comfortable with. Shouldn't students be allowed to focus on school without feeling pressured to join a club or participate in these events?" Malcolm nodded, understanding their point. "Of course, participation in the Harmony Club and its events is completely voluntary. But it's important that those who want and need a sense of community and belonging have that option. No one is forced to join, but everyone deserves to feel included." Ms. Carter leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "I agree. This school has a responsibility to every student, and fostering a safe, respectful environment is part of that responsibility." After much discussion, the board ultimately decided to continue supporting the Harmony Club and its initiatives. Malcolm left the meeting feeling relieved, but he knew that the journey was far from over. Changing minds took time, and he would need to continue advocating for the club and the progress it represented. Back at Oak Ridge, Ethan noticed subtle shifts in the school's atmosphere. While some students still looked at the club with indifference, others had started attending meetings, intrigued by the growing sense of unity. Tyler, who had been a bit hesitant in the beginning, now attended every meeting, even suggesting ideas for their next Unity Day. One afternoon, as they planned their next event, Tyler approached Ethan, his face serious. "I just wanted to say, thanks for starting this. I know I didn't really get it at first, but now, I think it's actually helping a lot of people." Ethan's heart warmed and he smiled at Tyler. "Thanks, Tyler. It means a lot to hear that." They shared a quiet moment, each realizing the impact that one small idea could have on an entire community. Later that evening, Ethan and Malcolm sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over their neighborhood. Ethan was quiet, a reflective look in his eyes. "Dad," he began softly, "do you think people will ever stop pushing back?" Malcolm put an arm around his son's shoulders. "Maybe some will, Ethan, but not everyone is ready for change. Sometimes, people hold on to old ideas because they're comfortable. It doesn't mean what we're doing isn't right." Ethan nodded, absorbing his father's words. "I guess it just feels like, for every step forward, there's someone trying to pull us back." Malcolm smiled, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "That's part of making a difference, son. Change isn't easy, and it's rarely quick. But as long as we're moving forward, even if it's slow, we're still making progress." Ethan leaned against his father, feeling the weight of the past months fade into a sense of quiet pride. They had faced challenges, encountered resistance, but they had also created something beautiful, a place where he, and others like him, could feel accepted. And as they watched the last rays of sunlight disappear, Ethan knew that no matter what lay ahead, he had the strength to keep going. With his father by his side, he was ready for whatever came next. The Harmony Club had transformed Oak Ridge Academy in ways no one could have imagined. Ethan, once a quiet, uncertain boy, was now a confident young leader, and Malcolm was prouder than ever. But as the school year continued, they began to realize that their efforts could reach beyond the walls of Oak Ridge. Inspired by the club's success, Malcolm and Ethan decided to take the mission of unity and acceptance to the entire community. One Friday afternoon, after a particularly lively Harmony Club meeting, Lily and some of the other club members stayed behind, brainstorming new ideas. Ethan mentioned the resistance they'd seen from certain students and parents, and suggested finding ways to engage the larger community in their efforts. "Maybe we could host an event for everyone," Lily suggested, her eyes lighting up. "Something that brings the entire community together, like a festival or a fair. It could show people what we're doing at Oak Ridge, and maybe even inspire other schools to start their own clubs." Ethan's face brightened. "I love that idea. We could call it the Day of Unity or something like that." The group immediately warmed to the idea, tossing around suggestions for booths, activities, and even guest speakers. They imagined a day where families, teachers, and students could come together to learn, celebrate, and share stories of empathy and resilience. When Ethan shared the idea with his father that evening, Malcolm's eyes gleamed with pride. "That's a brilliant idea, Ethan. I'd be happy to help with the planning. And I have a few friends who might be willing to sponsor the event." The next day, Malcolm contacted a few of his colleagues and local business owners, explaining the vision for a Day of Unity. To his delight, many of them expressed excitement, offering donations and resources. Local restaurants offered to set up food stands, community leaders volunteered to speak, and artists and musicians stepped forward, wanting to contribute their talents. Over the following weeks, the Harmony Club and their supporters worked tirelessly, organizing every detail. The excitement was contagious, and even students who hadn't previously participated in the club were eager to help out. Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose as he watched everyone come together, united by the shared goal of building a more inclusive community. Finally, the big day arrived. The town square was transformed with colorful banners, booths showcasing local art, and a stage set up for guest speakers and performances. Ethan's heart swelled with pride as he saw the crowd gathering, families, teachers, students, and community members, all coming together to support a cause that had grown from the seeds planted at Oak Ridge. Lily and Ethan kicked off the event, welcoming everyone and sharing the story of how the Harmony Club had come to be. As they spoke, Ethan noticed familiar faces in the crowd, parents who had once questioned the club's mission, students who had been skeptical, and even teachers who had needed time to adjust to the changes. Now they were all here, listening and showing their support. One of the guest speakers was a local activist named Mrs. Robinson, who spoke passionately about the importance of acceptance and understanding. She shared her own experiences growing up in a time when tolerance was even harder to come by, and expressed how proud she was to see young people leading the way. "Young leaders like Ethan and Lily are the future of this town," she said, her voice clear and steady. "They're showing us that acceptance and kindness are not just words but actions, and their work at Oak Ridge is proof that even small changes can create powerful ripples." As the crowd applauded, Ethan felt an overwhelming sense of pride, not just in himself, but in everyone who had helped bring the Harmony Club to life. He realized that what had started as a small effort to make his school feel a little safer had grown into something much larger than he'd ever dreamed. Later in the afternoon, Malcolm took the stage, his expression calm but his words heartfelt. "Today, we're here to celebrate not only our differences, but the strength and beauty that come from embracing them. My son Ethan has taught me that real courage comes from standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. And I'm so proud to see our community come together in that spirit." The audience erupted in applause, and Ethan felt a tear slip down his cheek. The event was a reminder of how far they had come and the impact they were making, not only on their school, but on the entire town. As the sun began to set, the Day of Unity concluded with a candlelight ceremony. Each person was given a candle, and the crowd gathered in a circle around the town square. Standing beside his father, Ethan looked around at the faces illuminated by the gentle glow of candlelight. Friends, classmates, teachers, and community members, all united by a shared commitment to acceptance and kindness. Malcolm's voice rang out over the quiet crowd. "As we light these candles, let's remember that each of us has the power to bring light into someone else's life. And together, we can create a community that values every single person." One by one, they lit their candles, the soft glow spreading through the crowd until the entire square was bathed in light. It was a moment of peace, a quiet acknowledgement of everything they had worked for and the journey that lay ahead. Afterward, people lingered, sharing stories, laughing and talking. Some approached Ethan, thanking him for his courage, while others expressed their gratitude to Malcolm for supporting the event. Ethan could hardly believe how much had changed. The town that had once seemed indifferent was now embracing his vision, standing beside him in a powerful display of unity. As Ethan and Malcolm walked home that night, tired but happy, they reflected on the journey they had taken. The Harmony Club had grown from a small idea into a movement, a call to action that had touched hearts far beyond Oak Ridge Academy. "You did something incredible today, Ethan," Malcolm said, his voice filled with pride. "I hope you know how much of a difference you've made." Ethan looked up at his father, his heart full. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. Thank you for always believing in me." Malcolm pulled his son into a hug, his voice choked with emotion. "I'll always believe in you, Ethan, and I can't wait to see all the good you'll bring to this world." They walked home in silence, content and at peace, knowing they had done something meaningful together. For Ethan, this was just the beginning. He knew that there would be challenges ahead, but now he had the courage to face them, alongside his father and the community that had come together to support him. The Day of Unity became a cherished memory, a reminder of how far they'd come and the powerful impact of a shared dream. And as they looked toward the future, both Ethan and Malcolm knew that their journey was far from over. They had ignited a movement, a beacon of hope for a brighter, more compassionate world. In the weeks following the Day of Unity, Oak Ridge Academy felt like a different place. The changes that had started within the walls of the Harmony Club now echoed throughout the school. Hallways that once buzzed with gossip and cliques now held a quieter, more inclusive atmosphere. Students were more likely to greet one another. New friendships formed, and even teachers noticed a difference in the energy among their classes. For Ethan, the transformation was personal. He walked through the halls with his head held high, his confidence blooming. He felt accepted, not just by his friends in the Harmony Club, but by the school as a whole. He was no longer the boy who sat alone at lunch or felt invisible during class. Now he was someone who had made a difference, and that sense of purpose filled him with a quiet strength he hadn't known before. One afternoon, Ethan was in the library when a familiar face approached him. Mason, the boy who had once mocked the Harmony Club's efforts, stood nearby, looking uncertain but determined. "Hey, Ethan," Mason said, his voice softer than usual. Can I talk to you for a second? Ethan nodded, gesturing for him to sit. Mason hesitated before taking a seat, fidgeting slightly as he tried to find the right words. I wanted to say sorry, Mason began, his gaze fixed on the table. I know I was kind of a jerk about the club and everything. I guess I didn't really get it before. But after the Day of Unity, I don't know. It kind of changed things for me. Ethan felt a warm sense of understanding. It's okay, Mason. A lot of people didn't understand at first. It's hard to get used to new things, especially when they ask us to look at things differently. Mason nodded, relief flooding his face. Yeah, I guess I was just, I don't know. Afraid, maybe? Of everything changing. Ethan smiled, the tension easing between them. Change can be scary, but it can also make things better. I'm glad you're here, though. We'd love to have you join the Harmony Club if you want to. Mason's eyes lit up, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Really? That would be… Yeah, I'd like that. As Mason joined Ethan in the Harmony Club meetings over the next few weeks, Ethan saw firsthand how powerful forgiveness and acceptance could be. Watching Mason grow into a friend rather than an adversary filled Ethan with a sense of hope. He realized that healing wasn't just about changing others' minds. It was about giving them the space to grow and learn. Meanwhile, the club continued to expand its activities. Under Mrs. Morales' guidance, they began hosting weekly courage chats, informal gatherings where students could share their experiences and discuss topics like empathy, acceptance, and resilience. These conversations allowed students to open up about challenges they faced, finding support in ways that once seemed impossible. One day, Sophia, a shy girl who had always stayed quiet in meetings, shared her story during a courage chat. She spoke about her struggles with fitting in due to her accent and how she'd felt like she didn't belong. As she spoke, other students listened intently, offering words of encouragement and understanding. Lily put a comforting hand on Sophia's shoulder, saying, "Thank you for sharing that, Sophia. I think a lot of us feel like we don't belong sometimes, but that's what makes this place special. We're all here for each other." Sophia's face softened, a hint of relief breaking through her usual shyness. She looked around at her classmates, her expression filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "For the first time I feel like maybe I do belong." The room was silent for a moment before the students broke into applause, their support surrounding Sophia in a way that words alone could not. Ethan felt a lump in his throat as he witnessed the power of kindness and acceptance transforming someone else's life. The Harmony Club was more than just a group. It was a family. At home, Malcolm continued to support Ethan's work with the Harmony Club, attending their events and helping organize new initiatives. He watched his son grow, not just in confidence but in empathy and understanding. Each night, Ethan would share stories from the club, describing how they had helped someone else or started a new project. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, Ethan looked at his father thoughtfully. "Dad, do you think we'll always need clubs like the Harmony Club?" Malcolm considered the question, his gaze softening. "I hope that one day, kindness and acceptance won't need any special place to be encouraged. But until then, I think it's important to have spaces where people can feel safe and valued." The Harmony Club is a part of something bigger, Ethan, a movement toward a kinder world. Ethan nodded, understanding. "Yeah, I guess you're right. It feels so good to know that things are changing, even if it's just a little." Malcolm wrapped an arm around his son's shoulders, pulling him close. "Every little bit counts, Ethan. You're helping to build a future where people care for one another, and that's a legacy you should be proud of." Ethan smiled, resting his head on his father's shoulder. In that quiet moment, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace, knowing that their efforts were making a difference, even if change was slow. As the school year drew to a close, Oak Ridge held its annual awards ceremony. Traditionally, the ceremony focused on academic achievements, with trophies given for high grades and sportsmanship. But this year, Principal Harris had added a new category, the Spirit of Unity Award, given to students who had shown exceptional commitment to creating a positive, inclusive environment. When Ethan's name was called, he felt a rush of emotions, pride, surprise, and gratitude. As he walked up to the stage, The applause grew louder, his classmates cheering him on, their smiles warm and genuine. Standing at the podium, Ethan looked out at the crowd, his heart full. "I'm honored to receive this award," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But this isn't just about me. It's about all of us. Everyone who's been part of the Harmony Club, who's shown kindness, and who's believed in making Oak Ridge a better place. We've done this together." He paused, glancing at his father in the audience, who gave him a nod of encouragement. "I used to think I didn't belong here, but now I know that each of us belongs, and we're all stronger together. Thank you for helping me see that." The crowd erupted in applause, and Ethan felt a deep sense of connection to everyone in that room. His journey had brought him from a place of isolation to one of belonging, from fear to courage, and he knew that his story was just one of many, that every person there had their own story of resilience and growth. After the ceremony, students and parents congratulated Ethan, some sharing stories of how the Harmony Club had impacted their lives. Teachers spoke with pride about the positive changes they'd seen, and Principal Harris shook Ethan's hand, his voice filled with warmth. "Thank you, Ethan. You've changed Oak Ridge for the better, and I have no doubt that your impact will last for years to come." At the final Harmony Club meeting of the year, the group reflected on their journey. They shared memories, laughed about the moments that hadn't gone as planned, and talked about their hopes for the future. Lily suggested keeping the club going next year, and everyone quickly agreed. "I'm just so grateful for all of you," Ethan said, his voice choked with emotion. "I couldn't have done this without each of you." As the meeting ended, the students lingered, not wanting the moment to end. They'd started as a small group with a simple idea, but they had grown into something much greater. A community built on friendship, resilience, and acceptance. For Ethan, the Harmony Club was more than just a club. It was a reminder of what could happen when people came together, united by kindness and a shared dream of a better world. The summer sun cast warm golden rays over Oak Ridge Academy's courtyard, where students gathered in small groups, talking and laughing as they waited for their parents. The school year had come to an end, and with it, the Harmony Club's first official year of existence. As Ethan stood near the entrance, surrounded by his friends, he felt a profound sense of accomplishment. Malcolm arrived shortly after the final bell, waving as he saw Ethan. Ethan ran over to him, his face bright with excitement. "Hey, Dad, guess what? Mrs. Morales said they're going to keep the Harmony Club running next year, even after I leave for middle school." Malcolm's smile was warm and full of pride. "That's amazing, Ethan. You've created something that's going to last." Ethan nodded, a bit misty-eyed as he looked around at the school that had once felt so unwelcoming. "I didn't think it was possible for things to change like this, but it did, and it's all because of the people who believed in making it better." Malcolm placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "That's the power of kindness, Ethan. When you lead with empathy, people follow, and you've shown everyone here that it's possible to make a real difference." As they walked through the courtyard, several students approached Ethan to say goodbye, many of them expressing gratitude for the impact the Harmony Club had made. Tyler, who had once been hesitant to join, gave Ethan a quick hug and a smile. "Thanks for everything, man. You really helped me see things differently." Lily, who had been one of Ethan's earliest friends, joined them, beaming. "You know, I think you've inspired a lot of people, Ethan, and not just at Oak Ridge. People are talking about starting clubs like this at other schools. Can you imagine that?" Ethan's heart swelled with pride and happiness. "I never thought anything like that would happen. I wanted a place to belong." Lily smiled softly, patting his arm. "And you made it happen, for all of us." As the students said their goodbyes, Ethan realized that he was leaving Oak Ridge with far more than he'd brought with him. He had come in as a quiet, uncertain boy, unsure of where he fit in. But now, he was leaving with friendships, memories, and a legacy he'd built with his own courage. That evening, Malcolm took Ethan out to dinner to celebrate the end of the school year. They sat by the window at their favorite restaurant, the warm, bustling atmosphere a perfect backdrop for their conversation. "Ethan," Malcolm began, his voice soft but full of admiration, "I hope you know how proud I am of you. What you've done at Oak Ridge? It's something most people only dream of. You've shown everyone what it means to stand up for what's right." Ethan looked down, smiling shyly. "Thanks, Dad. I don't think I could have done it without you. You always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Malcolm's eyes shone with emotion. "It's easy to believe in someone as strong and kind as you, Ethan. You've taught me so much about resilience, about not giving up, and I know that wherever you go, you'll keep bringing that same courage and kindness with you." Ethan nodded, feeling a quiet determination settle over him. "I want to, Dad. I want to help people see that everyone deserves to feel safe and accepted. Even if it's just one person, it's worth it." Malcolm reached across the table, holding his son's hand. "Then keep being you, Ethan. Keep leading with empathy, and I have no doubt you'll change even more lives." As summer began, Ethan found himself reflecting on the journey he'd taken. He often revisited the memories of those early days at Oak Ridge, the loneliness and the whispers, the feeling of being different. But instead of sadness, he now felt a sense of pride in how far he had come. He had transformed not only himself, but also the world around him, leaving a lasting impact that would be felt by students and teachers alike. One afternoon, Ethan and Malcolm decided to visit Oak Ridge Academy to meet with Principal Harris. The principal greeted them warmly, his gratitude evident in his smile. "Ethan, Malcolm," he said, shaking their hands, "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for Oak Ridge. The Harmony Club has become a vital part of our school, and it's inspired students and staff alike." Malcolm nodded, smiling at his son. "It's all thanks to Ethan's vision and resilience. He showed us what was possible." Principal Harris gestured toward a wall near the main entrance where a plaque had been installed. It read, "In honor of the Harmony Club, established by Ethan Williams and friends, for their dedication to kindness and inclusivity." Ethan's eyes widened as he read the words, feeling a rush of emotion. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Principal Harris replied, his voice filled with warmth. "You've left a mark on this school, Ethan. This plaque is a reminder of the legacy you've created. It will serve as a reminder for future students to carry forward the values of empathy and respect." Ethan touched the plaque gently, overwhelmed by the recognition. It was a symbol of everything he had worked for, a testament to the journey he had taken and the change he had inspired. As Ethan and Malcolm left the school that day, they walked in comfortable silence, each lost in their thoughts. Malcolm looked down at his son, a quiet pride radiating from him. "Ethan," he said softly, breaking the silence, "you've shown everyone that it's possible to make the world a better place, no matter where you are or what you've been through." Ethan nodded, smiling up at his father. "I couldn't have done it without you, Dad. You helped me believe it was possible, and that's what kept me going." They continued walking, feeling the weight of their shared journey and the bond that had only deepened through the experience. For Ethan, this was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with possibility and purpose. And for Malcolm, it was a moment of profound pride, knowing that his son had become a beacon of kindness and courage. That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the stars come out, Ethan leaned against his father, feeling a sense of peace he hadn't known before. "Do you think other kids will keep the Harmony Club going, even when I'm gone?" Ethan asked, his voice quiet but hopeful. Malcolm nodded, his gaze fixed on the night sky. "I think you've inspired something that will last, Ethan. You've shown them what's possible, and that's a gift that will keep giving." Ethan smiled, content in the knowledge that he had made a difference, not only for himself but for those who would come after him. He had faced challenges, endured hardships, but he had emerged stronger, with a heart full of gratitude, and a spirit determined to spread kindness wherever he went. And as the stars twinkled above, father and son sat together, knowing that they had accomplished something extraordinary. Together they had created a legacy of empathy, one that would light the way for others, like a constellation guiding those who sought acceptance and understanding. Their journey was complete, but the impact of their actions would continue to resonate, a lasting testament to the power of compassion, courage, and unity. If this story moved you and you'd like to hear more stories that inspire, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Stay tuned for more tales of resilience, courage, and compassion. Thank you for being part of this journey with Ethan and Malcolm.